Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Dark Prose, a series where I recap and analyze horror literature. Our topic today is A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, published on April 30th, 1930. It is known as one of the best Southern Gothic stories ever. The story begins with the funeral of Miss Emily Grierson in the fictional town of Jefferson, Mississippi. The men attended the funeral to pay their respects, while the women went there out of curiosity to see the inside of her house, which no one had seen for so many years except her old manservant. Emily belonged to a respected family, and the town regarded her as an obligation. Way back in 1894, Colonel Sartoris, the mayor, invented a story that Miss Emily's father loaned a huge amount of money to the town. Because of this, her father, and subsequently Miss Emily, did not have to pay taxes. The next generation came, and this arrangement between the government and Miss Emily's estate caused a stir among them. They did not believe that the town owed money to Miss Emily, so they sent her a tax notice and she did not respond. They wrote her a formal letter and asked her to give the town sheriff a call at her convenience, which she ignored. A week later, the mayor wrote her a letter and even offered to send a car to pick her up. Miss Emily merely replied with a note saying that she did not go out of the house anymore. The town officials called for a meeting and sent some men to visit her. At that time, she had not received anyone for many years, and she had also ceased giving china painting lessons for a long while. The men were admitted by Miss Emily's servant and found themselves in a dimly lit hallway. He led them into a parlor, and they could not help but notice that the house smelled of dust and dank. The room was furnished with heavy leather-covered furniture, and when the housekeeper opened the window blinds, the government officials saw that the leather was cracked. It was never maintained, and when they sat, dust rose from the seat. Miss Emily came and did not even ask them if they wanted a drink. She just stood by the door and listened to what they had to say. Her voice was dry and cold. "I have no taxes in Jefferson," she said. She added that they must ask Colonel Sartoris, or that they should consult with the authorities. The men explained that they were the authorities. Miss Emily just brushed them off and repeated that they must speak to Colonel Sartoris. She told her servant to show the gentleman the door. At that time, Colonel Sartoris had been dead for almost 10 years. That's how she was. Powerful and stern, she sent them away the same way she sent people away 30 years ago before the bad smell incident. The bad smell incident happened 2 years after her father died, and about a few months after her boyfriend deserted her, one who many people thought she would marry. She went out very little when her father passed away. And when her boyfriend left her, people hardly ever saw her. Some women in town checked on her, but the servant just dismissed them. When the house began to smell, the women were not surprised. They said that a male housekeeper is never capable of keeping a house in order. One neighbor complained to the court about the smell, but the judge dismissed the complaint and said it was just probably a dead rat. Several others complained the following days, but the judge would not do anything about it. 4 men took matters into their own hands. One night, they crossed into Miss Emily's lawn and sprinkled lime across the yard. They also broke into the cellar to scatter lime, thinking that the dead rat must be in there. As the 4 men recrossed the lawn, a light shone from Miss Emily's bedroom upstairs, and they saw her sitting, motionless like a statue. After a couple of weeks, the foul smell went away. That was the time people felt really sorry for her. Her father was dead, and her boyfriend abandoned her. People knew that Miss Emily's aunt had gone crazy, and yet her family stood high and mighty. It seemed that they esteemed themselves a little too high. Her father dismissed suitors as if to say none of the men were good enough for her. When she got to be 30 and was still single, the townsfolk felt vindicated, saying that her being single at 30 was a curse. And when her father died, word came out that he left her only the house and nothing more. No businesses, no money, and no riches. The people were happy about it. At least now Miss Emily wouldn't be a snob. She is finally poor and ordinary just like everyone else. The day after her father's death, some ladies visited her to pay their respects. She met them at the door, cold and without a trace of grief on her face. She just told them that her father was not dead. She did this for 3 days, and it took them a lot of persuasion to convince her to bury his body. She agreed, and the townsfolk buried her father rather quickly. Nobody called her crazy, and many people thought it was her way of coping. Miss Emily got sick for a long time after that, and when people saw her again, her hair was cut short, and this made her look like a girl. That summer, construction work for paving the sidewalks began. The contracting company had a foreman named Homer Barron who came from New York. He was popular in Jefferson, and young children followed him around. Within a few weeks, he knew everybody in town, and wherever he was, there was also laughter. Homer was always at the center of a group, telling stories that people found amusing. Pretty soon, people saw Homer and Emily on Sunday afternoons in a yellow-wheeled buggy. At first, people were happy that Miss Emily now had a love interest, but some people said that a woman of her caliber would never date a construction worker. Still, Emily held her head high when she went around town, and people could only say, "Poor Emily." She walked as if she demanded dignity simply because she was a Grierson. She used to be elite. Now she had nothing but her house and her construction worker boyfriend. When Miss Emily first dated Homer, people thought they would get married. But as time passed by, this rumor changed. Homer himself once admitted that he liked men, and people knew that he often had a drink with young men at the Elk Club. Some of the ladies, knowing that Homer was not the marrying type, said that Miss Emily and Homer were a bad example to young people, dating and possibly fornicating without the sanctity of marriage. The ladies pleaded with the local Baptist minister to speak to her. And he did. He visited Miss Emily once and never spoke to her again. Nobody knows what they talked about, and the minister wouldn't tell anybody no matter how they insisted. The next Sunday, the minister's wife wrote a letter to Miss Emily's relatives in Alabama. It was then that her two female cousins arrived. One day, she went to the drugstore and asked for poison. Doesn't matter what kind. He recommended arsenic and told Miss Emily that by law, she must state what she would use the arsenic for. Miss Emily just stared at him until he looked away and wrapped the arsenic in a package. That's how respected she was. People would break the law for her with a single stare. The druggist told the townsfolk that Miss Emily needed the strongest poison. The word got around town, and all the people thought that she would kill herself. They all agreed that it was the best thing for her to do. But she didn't kill herself. People began to gossip that Miss Emily would get married when she went to a jeweler and ordered a man's toilet set in silver. She asked the jeweler to engrave the letters H and B on each piece. 2 days later, she also ordered a complete outfit for a man, which included a nightshirt. The thing was that Homer Barron disappeared at the time the road development was over. The people were a bit disappointed that there was no farewell party for him, but they believed that he left for New York to prepare for his wedding with Miss Emily. Eventually, the two female cousins left, and within 3 days, Homer Barron was back in town. Someone saw the manservant admit him to the house. That, however, was the last people saw of Homer Barron, and many people believed that he abandoned Miss Emily. Her manservant went in and out of the house with a market basket. Miss Emily never came out, but people would see her now and again at her window. After about 6 months, Miss Emily finally showed up. She had turned obese, and her hair began to turn gray. Her hair eventually turned grayer over time, ultimately reaching an even iron gray color. She also became more reclusive, and her front door remained closed for about 7 years. When she turned 40, she gave young kids lessons on china, painting in a studio in one of the rooms downstairs. As the newer generation took over, people lost interest in her lessons. It was during this period when Miss Emily finally shut down her doors to anybody. When postal service became free, she would not even allow the postman to fasten a metal number on her door. The housekeeper went in and out of the house to the market. People watched him daily, weekly, and for so many years. Every December, the government would send Miss Emily a tax notice only to be returned to the post office, marked as unclaimed. Now and then, some people would see her by the window downstairs. It was evident that the top floor of her house was shut. This went on for decades until she finally died. She fell ill and succumbed to death in one of the rooms downstairs in a heavy walnut bed. The manservant called for help from the ladies in the neighborhood. As they were looking at her corpse, the housekeeper exited the back door and was never seen again. The townsfolk called upon Miss Emily's two female cousins, who promptly arrived. They held the funeral the following day. Many people came, either to pay their respects or out of curiosity. Some men even claimed that they courted her. The ladies sounded like they were friends with her. Everyone already knew that there was a room upstairs that Miss Emily shut down. No one had seen this room in over 40 years since Homer Barron abandoned her. The people waited until Miss Emily was buried before breaking down the door. The room was decorated like a bridal one. The curtains had the color of a faded rose. There was a dressing table, and people saw the man's toilet things with the engraved letters on them. There was a tie, and on a chair was a suit, carefully folded with two shoes on the floor. On the bed was the man himself. For a long while, the people just stood there, shocked. They stared at the skeleton, which apparently was in an embrace before the man succumbed to death. On the second pillow was an indentation, a sign that a head lay here to sleep for a long time. One of the people lifted something from it, and when they took a closer look, there was no mistaking it. It was a long strand of gray hair, and that is the end of the story. Now let us move on to some of the burning questions about this short story to understand why it has become a literary Southern Gothic masterpiece. Here is the first question. What did the people find on the bed upstairs? They found the remains of Homer Barron. His skeleton was wearing a nightshirt, the same one Miss Emily bought along with the suit. Everyone thought that Homer left Miss Emily, considering that he was from New York and was never interested in marrying her, but not this. No one suspected this to happen. How did Homer Barron die? Miss Emily murdered Homer Barron. She bought arsenic from the drugstore and killed him. But why? Why would Miss Emily do such a thing? She fell in love only once. Her father sent all her suitors away. Do you remember the feeling when you first got romantically involved with someone? Just imagine Miss Emily feeling that way. She was in the clouds, only to find out that Homer had no plans of marrying her. When Homer came into her life, Miss Emily's father just died. In addition, her family has a history of insanity. All these factors put together make it possible for her to snap. She killed Homer because of love and anger. She wanted to be with him forever, but he had other plans, like possibly going back to New York. Miss Emily would have none of this and decided to kill him. Now, what is the significance of the gray hair on the pillow? The gray hair and the indentation on the pillow both mean that someone slept on it for a long, long time. It was Miss Emily's hair, and it would only be there if she slept on that same bed while Homer's corpse was decomposing. When the four men spread lime on her lawn, they saw her on the top floor. Homer was already dead, rotting in her bedroom, which caused the bad smell. Miss Emily was just sitting there like a statue, which means she also slept with him when the bad smell began to bother her neighbors. This reveal at the end of the story suggests that Miss Emily slept on the same bed with the corpse for decades. Why was Miss Emily like that? Miss Emily grew up very protected by her father. She had very little interaction with the world, and her father dismissed all her suitors, keeping her isolated. It seems that Miss Emily was incapable of moving forward. It is why she could not cope when her father died, and when government officials asked her to pay taxes, she just kept saying that they should speak to Colonel Sartoris. Add to that the fact that mental illness ran in her family, and what you have is a mental breakdown that is waiting to happen. Now, what about the house? The story mentions several times that it is dusty. What does the house symbolize? The house symbolizes decay and the passage of time, of how the world changes. More importantly, the house is a symbol of how some people cannot let go of the past. The world around Miss Emily had changed, and yet her house remained the same. It also represents how the house became a prison that Miss Emily created for herself. As far as the rose is concerned, it was never mentioned anywhere in the story except the title. What is its significance? The rose is a symbol of love and a twisted version of it. It is also a symbol of pity. Miss Emily's life was not financially hard, but she had fallen, with no one she could count on for support. In addition, we know that Emily longed for love. She desired it and only had it for a fleeting moment. How about the hair? Is there a deeper meaning to it? Yes, the gray hair found on the pillow represents a person's descent into madness. Miss Emily was lonely, reclusive, and isolated. She was in love with someone who had no plans of taking their relationship to the next level. Her gray hair is also a representation of the passage of time, and that she attempted to hold on to some moments in this time, refusing to let go of the fun moments she had with Homer. How come the people gossip so much about Miss Emily? Well, Miss Emily came from a rich family, and when you are rich, you will always be the subject of chatter. Then and now, people love to judge others. Although the people in Jefferson used to hold her in high regard, times have changed, and the residents have become more and more judgmental. The dynamics of the town shifted as progress happened. Miss Emily, however, allowed herself to be left behind, refusing to adjust to the demands of the new world. I read A Rose for Emily in my sophomore year from our literature school book, which our teacher asked us to write an essay about. I had a few sleepless nights because of it. The thought of someone sleeping with a corpse horrified me. Do you think Miss Emily was a victim or a villain? She suffered emotionally and mentally, and yet she murdered the very person she loved. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.